Hello and welcome back for the first time to my school project. This is for science class, featuring my mother. Say hello.
Hello.
She's not on camera because she is not dressed.
Well, I'm not undressed.
Yeah, but you're not wearing
Presentable clothes.
Yeah. Anyway, this is a science project that I'm doing on the science and potential for a zombie apocalypse. So starting off, I figured I would give some backstory on zombie lore. There's no actual solid provable place where modern day zombies came from, but there are several different places where it would make sense for them to have come from. First of all, rabies. Rabies is a disease that is transferred through blood and saliva, which causes psychosis, hydrophobia, a lot of internal pain, and it's just overall not a great disease to have. And that could very well be where some parts of zombie lore came from. Another thing is Lazarus syndrome, which is where people come back from the dead. It generally happens very shortly after death, but it has been known to be later, although that is much rarer. Next is Wendigo syndrome / psychosis, which is which is based around Wendigos in folklore, which are these frozen demon spirit things that will eat human flesh. And there are a couple different ways that Wendigos can form, but the most common way is from people getting trapped during winter and having to resort to cannibalism to survive. And then there is something actually called Wendigo syndrome or Wendigo psychosis, where people do have cannibalistic ideation and their brains are telling them, you need to eat human.
Yikes.
Yes, yikes indeed. Next is Kuru disease. I believe that I'm pronouncing that right. Which is a fatal neurodegenerative disease caused by infectious proteins in brain tissue. So people who are cannibalizing other people will get that from eating their brain, which is another very likely place for zombies to have come from, because in a lot of zombie media, zombies will eat brains specifically. And the final thing on my list is parasites. There are parasites and insects, mostly in Australia, because that place is terrifying. Yeah, thank you. That have neurotoxins that can cause these sorts of psychoses. Psychoses?
I think.
The plural of psychosis. The first one, parasite, insect-based zombies. There are certain types of insects that do in a way possess each other via laying eggs in the brain. There are types of wasps that do that, types of spiders that do that, but they cannot do that to people, so this isn't a very viable option. There is, of course, the neurotoxin aspect, like with so many different things in Australia, because that place is actual hell, I think.
Australians are gonna come for you.
Australians are fine. Where they live is just scary. But there isn't really that much of a basis for an actual apocalypse from that, or a widespread of a zombie pandemic, because the people would not have the neurotoxins. It would be in the plant, animal, insect that initially dosed them with the neurotoxin. Next, there are medical-based zombies. There are certain diseases that cause psychosis, mostly mental disorders, but there are also other things like encephalitis, which is a swelling in the brain, which can also cause psychosis, cannibalistic ideation, which can happen because of a number of different things, including schizophrenia, and obsessive compulsive disorder, though that is very, very rare for people with OCD to actually cannibalize others. It's more about controlling their food than it is about actually eating people. Next is hallucination. One might hallucinate that this person that they are seeing is an animal that they need to hunt, or Mother, get it together. Or some other sort of thing that needs to be hunted and eaten. So they won't process in their brain that this is another person, and they would just be hallucinating. Rotting skin and necrosis, it could be leprosy. That is a very easy way to get that explained. Sorry. As well as limbs and extremities falling off. However, this also wouldn't be that viable of an option for an actual zombie outbreak, as these all have many different factors, and many of them are not infectious. Finally, mycelium-based zombies. Mushrooms are absolutely fascinating to me. I've always had a fascination with mushrooms and mycelium. Mushrooms can communicate above ground with other mushroom colonies, as well as in their underground interconnected neural networks, which are like sort of like roots in a way. But all of these mushrooms, the bodies that we see above the ground, those are the sexual organs of the mushrooms. Those are the bodies of the mushrooms. Or no, the sexual organs of the mushrooms. And then the underground, where all the roots are, that's the brain and the body of the mushroom that connects all of it like one gigantic brain. So that is absolutely incredible. And then they can even communicate with other mushroom colonies via a sort of singing that we as people and animals can't hear, which is just absolutely fascinating. Mushrooms are so cool. Next up, how mushrooms reproduce. There are multiple different ways that they can reproduce, very similar to plants. Mushrooms are not technically plants, they are an entire different category of being. Mushrooms have over 23,000 different sexes.
How does that even work?
As long as they aren't the same sex type, they can reproduce with another mushroom.
So, like, across species?
I don't believe so, but, like, they're every single different mushroom, pretty much. Like, if you just see, like, a couple hundred mushrooms, there's a very high chance that they are all different sexes, so that they can all just, whoop, reproduce.
Interesting.
They also can reproduce via spores that they release into the air, and also through, like, being eaten. That's another way that it can happen, being eaten. And then they can either cause psychosis, like sometimes happens in ants, where they will climb up blades of grass, latch onto the blade of grass, and then release the spores. Or by fecal transplant, which is where the growy parts, not really seeds, but the basis for new mushroom life will be in the feces and then spring up from that fertilizer. Specifically, something that I wanted to talk about were cordyceps. Cordyceps are a type of mushroom that have been known quite often to actually create zombies, but in insects. They are not able to survive temperatures as high as the human body. They die at, I actually forget, hang on, Google. What temp do cordyceps die? Okay, cordyceps fungi are generally unable to survive temperatures above 94.1 degrees Fahrenheit, 34.5 degrees Celsius. Okay, which is slightly higher than the average human body temperature, but also...
Slightly lower.
No, it was 94. That's about average.
Human body temperature is 98.
Oh. I forgot how much humans are... How
much hot?
How much hot inside? Which is below the average human body temperature, so they would not be able to take hold inside of us. But what they do with these insects, like I said before, they will climb up onto these blades of grass, latch on, and then release the spores. Another way that they could feasibly do that was with attacking other insects and getting the spores directly inside of them. instead of just inhaling them or eating them the way that it would normally happen. Now,
did you know there's some concern that those
I think you're about to ruin some of my project. These cordyceps often are found on wheat, and wheat is generally heavily processed, and cooked as well, since it's generally used in things like baked goods, pasta, which are things that are cooked. Feasibly, however, if a cordyceps were to find a way to survive higher temperatures, which is very likely due to climate change, then they could potentially actually get into a human. Probably not for a long while, since we cook wheat, unless the person just ate raw wheat or came into contact with spores on a raw wheat stalk. And actually something very interesting is that there is a lot of evidence to prove that mushroom-induced, specifically cordyceps-induced psychosis was a big factor in the Salem witch trials. Causing psychosis, making people see things, and then accusing each other of witchcraft.
But I thought you just said that they can't survive in the human body.
They can't, but there can still be effects on the body from what makes up the mushroom. Like, psychedelic mushrooms.
Interesting.
Which brings me to my next topic, mushroom-induced psychosis. It's hallucinogenic drugs. Mushrooms can cause psychosis. They can make you see things, which could also potentially cause you to eat your neighbor.
Or you might think your neighbor wants to eat you.
Next up is transference, and this is the final one in the mycelium-based mushroom category. Transference can be done in a number of ways. Getting the mushrooms directly into the person's bloodstream, for example, by biting them, and then from your saliva, because the mushroom is all in you, it would get into their bloodstream. Next, aerial transference, spores. You would inhale them, and then boom, zombie. And you could also potentially eat them if the cordyceps were able to survive in a high enough heat environment. Then they could feasibly get into your body just from eating a wheat-based product. The likelihood of each issue resulting in an actual apocalyptic situation. Obviously, it's mycelium-based because that one had the most evidence and the most logic to it. With parasite, animal, insect-based zombies, there is far too little evidence of that actually happening. For medical-based zombies, there are too many variables that would have to be perfectly set together for anybody to actually go into that psychosis state that we see in most zombies in media. But for mushrooms, there is actual feasible logic, and it is very possible that this could happen in our world if we continue the way we're going, climate change-wise. All of my sources will be linked below. Thanks for watching this video essay. My mom's doing a thumbs up. Thank you. Gross.